Thank you all for coming. I'm Debra Schultz, and on behalf of the Elizabeth A. Sackler Center for Feminist Art, I'd like to welcome you. This is a very unique experience that we're going to have, learning about Mary Johnson's new memoir, An Unquenchable Thirst, following Mother Teresa in search of love, service, and an authentic life. I personally devoured the book when I was lucky enough to get an advance copy, so I know that you will be spellbound with Mary's presentation this afternoon. The book has been featured in the September issue of Poets and Writers and excerpted in the October issue of O Magazine, which portends well, does it not? Texas-born Mary Johnson spent her life from age 17 to 37, 20 years, as Sister Donata, a nun in Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity, until she left the order in 1997. Now a respected teacher and public speaker, she's been named a fellow of the MacDowell Colony and is on the board of A Room of Her Own, a foundation for women artists and writers, whose biennial retreat she directed this summer. And she currently lives in New Hampshire. I met Mary 2 years ago at an Orojo women's writing retreat at Ghost Ranch, New Mexico. The land around Ghost Ranch, as some of you may know, is exquisite and was the inspiration for many of Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings. That beautiful setting inspired many of us to have faith that we'd find time and ways to write in the spirit of Virginia Woolf's declaration that women writers need 500 guineas and a room of their own. At the retreat, where I met Mary, I learned that she was the first recipient of Orojo's Gift of Freedom, a $50,000 award over 2 years to complete a writing project. As a former funder of women's projects, I know that such a generous-spirited award was itself a miracle, and you'll learn more about this wonderful women's writing community today. And even though Mary told us at the time that she was writing a memoir about working with Mother Teresa, it was hard to envision that this warm, energetic, funny person was a nun for 20 years, let alone a member of one of the world's most ascetic orders. For me, as a little Jewish girl in public school in Brooklyn, I found the nuns who came to pick up Catholic kids for religious instruction every Wednesday utterly mysterious, powerful, and intriguing. I yearned to know more. Mary Johnson has finally lifted that veil in a uniquely intimate and authentic way. An Unquenchable Thirst does what the best memoir should. It seduces the reader along a journey of transformation, challenging us to engage our own questions about love, spirituality, and vocation. Let me explain today's format. Mary is going to talk and show images from her experience and then read from An Unquenchable Thirst. Then I'll ask her a couple of questions and we'll open it up for your questions. And finally, Mary will be selling and signing books. So we're expecting to go until about 4 o'clock today. Now it is truly my pleasure and honor to introduce Mary Johnson, the artist formerly known as Sister Donata.
Thank you so much, Debra, and thank you, Rebecca, and thank the Elizabeth Sackler Foundation. It's such a privilege for me to be here in this place. You know what's in that next room over there, Judy Chicago's dinner party. I've spent hours there in that room among all of these women from history who are represented there with their own plates and banners, and it's just a really fantastic, very sacred to me, very special place, and I hope you'll have a chance to look at that and other things in the museum. I don't expect to be here till 4, but but I am very happy for this opportunity, and I'd just like to start, I think, by showing you some photos. It's kind of a way into understanding my experience. And it's also a way of talking about writing a memoir, because the photos that I'm going to show you and the facts that I'm going to tell you about my life are really kind of like the raw material. And then at a certain point, I'm going to read you a piece from my memoir, and you'll kind of perhaps get a sense of what it might be to take the raw facts of someone's life and craft them into something which is hopefully, meaningful and kind of carries you along with the story, turning life into art in a certain sense. So that's my book. It's been out almost 2 weeks now. Yeah, that's still kind of like hard for me to believe, but okay. Perhaps you remember this cover from a 2000 issue of Time magazine. My relationship with this cover is kind of unique because I was on my way from New Hampshire, where I live. I was in New York. I had just parked the car, and I was on my way to meet a prospective literary agent for my book. I hadn't quite finished writing it, but I knew I was almost there. And on my way to the agency, I saw this cover of Time magazine in a newsstand. And I looked at it, and it was like, this was the expression that Mother Teresa had on her face the last time that we spoke, just a few days before I left. What I see there is confusion and doubt. And if I had believed in signs, still, that would have been a really big one to see on my way to meet, as I was about to kind of reveal my secret life. And this was when the letters that Mother Teresa had written to her spiritual directors were published 10 years after her death, which revealed the doubts, the struggles, the way she expressed that she had felt tormented in her soul, things that were never made public while she was alive, things that she kept hidden from us sisters as well. So that was kind of the place that I wanted to start today. It's also kind of where my book starts, but then we back up. And I want to talk about all the things that led up to that last conversation I had with Mother Teresa in May of 1997. And I'm going to go way, way back. I was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan in 1958, the eldest child of a Catholic family, and as the eldest child of a good Catholic family, the eldest daughter, I was named Mary. Continuing the good Catholic family tradition, Kathy came along very quickly afterwards. Cindy and Dorothy, Margaret, Joe and Heather. By the time this photo is taken, my family now lives in Texas. I'm 12 years old. My dad has changed jobs, and there we are. Here I'm a senior in high school, and I'm trying to decide what to do with my life. I had options. I was a good student. I'd edited the school newspaper. I was a star of the debate team, kind of known for humiliating my opponents. My classmates had voted me most likely to succeed. And then one day, I was passing in front of the library on my way to class, and I saw this cover of Time magazine. And the eyes on this cover, it was like this nun was looking at me and saying, I knew she had something to say to me. And I went into the library, and I took the Time magazine off the shelf, and I sat down, and I skipped French class. And I read the thing. It was like the whole world was opening up for me. And I read about how Mother Teresa was taking the poor off the street, how she was finding babies abandoned in dustbins and caring for them. And in that moment, somehow, I knew that I was meant to follow her in her service to God and to the poor. I experienced that as a call. And that was when I was a senior in high school. Several letters and 2 semesters at the University of Texas later, I found myself in the South Bronx. Mother had given me permission to join the sisters. This is the crucifix that she pinned to my blouse, making me an aspirant in the Missionaries of Charity, the first stage of formation on my way to becoming a real nun. This photo was taken in the Sisters' Refectory in the South Bronx. I'm the one with the flute. I'd been in the convent for a month at this time, and if you look really closely at my knees, you will see that calluses are already beginning to develop. We did an awful lot of praying. And we did it on a rough carpet. There were no pews in a Missionaries of Charity chapel. We just knelt on the carpet there for very long periods of time. The sisters here, many of them are sitting on the floor because it was a feast day. People had come from we had a convent of contemplative sisters also in the South Bronx. There wasn't enough room at the table. When I joined the sisters, there were 12 of us in that first group of aspirants. By the time I finished the 6 months of my aspirancy, there were 2 of us left. And we went as postulants to Rome, which was really exciting. After 6 months of postulants, and we kind of dressed the way we had before, we became novices. And as novices, Mother Teresa gave us the white sari, the white habit. She cut our hair, and we entered an intensive time of preparation. The novitiate lasted 2 years. It was a time of prayer, of study, of trying to figure out, did we really want to take these vows? This is a photo that was taken. This is a close-up of me. In addition to getting the sari and the habit, we got a new name when we became novices. And I am here Sister Donata, which means freely given, like donation. The person sitting next to me is my sister Kathy. She came with my parents. They surprised me in St. Peter's Square. They came there for my first profession. The big day when I would take my vows, it was like a marriage to Jesus. Here I am in the church professing my vows. It was a big deal. A lot of people came to these professions. Here Mother Teresa is tucking a cross at my waist. The cross was the sign that we were professed sisters now, that we had taken our vows. The sari with the blue border was the same sort of sign. Here we're back at the convent immediately after profession. These are all the sisters who took vows together with me. We were given these garlands of roses, and that, I am told, is where the rose petals on the cover of my book came from the rose garlands that the sisters wore. Though actually those are carnation petals on the cover. But that's where the idea of the petals came from this photo. You'll notice also, we really did live a very poor life. This was our convent. It was a small convent on the outskirts of Rome along the Via Appia Nuova. Mother met our families. This was a priest who was close to our family, who was studying in Rome at the time. At this moment, I think it's time to pause and say, so I took these vows. What were those vows? What are the vows that a nun takes? Every nun in the Roman Catholic Church takes 3 vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. Missionaries of Charity, the group founded by Mother Teresa of Calcutta, takes an additional vow. It's a vow to give wholehearted and free service to the poorest of the poor, and it's that vow that gives the Missionaries of Charity a particular place in the church. The vow of poverty is something that we really took very seriously. We lived among the poor, like the poor, as much as possible. We had 2 sets of clothes, which meant that every time we changed them, we had to wash them. We washed our clothes by hand in buckets, and we would put them on the line to dry and pray that it wouldn't rain. We also did whatever work we could ourselves. Here we're in Rome, and we're painting the room of where we had several very severely disabled children. When I was a novice in Rome, we did a lot of the work, the construction work. We made 3 bathing rooms when I was there, and I learned a little bit about plumbing. The sisters before me had actually built the house. Next vow is chastity. And this photo, to me, I found this photo on the web, and I think it really epitomizes Mother Teresa's attitude towards human touch. I think that in this photo, she's kind of saying, hands off, please. Mother really was not comfortable with human touch. She taught us that we belonged body, soul, affections entirely, as she used to say, only, always, all for Jesus. And we were not allowed to touch each other. You'll notice in those photos that you've seen until now, even on the days of profession, sisters did not give each other a hug. We weren't even really, supposed to touch anyone unless it was a case of real necessity. But even further than that, we were not to have close friends in the group among the sisters. We were to treat everyone exactly the same. We were never to be alone with one other person in a room unless we were speaking privately with our superior or our confessor. There were these sorts of rules that eventually became very difficult for me. But that's kind of getting ahead of the story, but eventually I came to realize I needed just kind of normal human context. So our vow of chastity also was supposed to lead us deeply into the one intimate relationship that was encouraged, and that was the relationship with God. We spent at least 4 hours in prayer every day. The Eucharistic adoration was one of the preferred forms of prayer. So that's poverty, chastity, and obedience. In the Missionaries of Charity, obedience covered really everything in our life. We would get up at 4:40 in the morning. We were supposed to be in bed by 10. I often didn't manage that. I had various responsibilities that kept me up past then. But every moment between 4:40 and 10 o'clock was scheduled. In the book, I reproduced the schedule, and people tend to be shocked when they see it. We actually were given 1 hour of free time a week, and very often did not get that. But that structure gave, gave us a context in which to live out our life. Each time the bell would ring, because every time the activity changed, a half hour of spiritual reading was over, the bell would ring and we'd go to wash the clothes. 20 minutes later, the bell would ring and we'd go to do the housework. That bell ringing and that schedule was considered the voice of God. We were told that if we were writing a note to someone, we should stop in the middle of a word if that's the moment that the bell rang. It was that sort of obedience. And it didn't involve just the schedule, but our superiors chose where we would live, what sort of work we would do, who the sisters in the community were. We had no say in any of that. That was all predetermined, and it was considered that obedience to those things was obedience to the voice of God. So poverty, chastity, obedience, and wholehearted and free service to the poorest of the poor. This is the work for which Mother Teresa became widely known. This is Kalighat, the home for the dying in Calcutta. This is another home in Calcutta. This is a place where the sisters care for people with various mental illnesses. You'll notice that here they're washing the clothes and the sheets of the people who stayed with us there, again, all by hand. This is a home for orphans in Romania. The Missionaries of Charity live and work with the poor in over 130 countries throughout the world, so they're really everywhere. My first assignment after profession was to go back to the South Bronx. Sometimes we took the kids from summer day camp on field trips out in the country. At the end of the first year, we would have to ask permission to renew our vows. The first 6 years that we took our vows, we took vows for 1 year at a time. And we'd write a letter asking Mother Teresa for permission, and she would write us back a little note, and that note would include the virtues that she thought we needed to give a special attention to during that year. So this is the first note of that kind that I got from Mother, and you can see that I had many virtues that I needed to improve. Yeah. My next assignment was in Washington, D.C. This is the soup kitchen that we had there. We also had programs for the children. This is Thanksgiving Day. We didn't always have singing during the soup kitchen, but special occasions. My next assignment was in Winnipeg, which is very cold. But we had a shelter there for... We knew that there was a need to have a shelter there for homeless men. Many of them died on the streets every winter because it was so cold. But even though we did express that, we are actually had a shelter for women and children. Though there were several of those in the city. There were these kinds of things that happened that didn't always quite make a lot of sense. But some of the neighbors had objected to the idea. They were afraid that these women's husbands would come, violent or whatever. And this fellow on the top especially was very concerned about that. And so we had several meetings with the city council. But after Winnipeg, it was time for me to go back to Rome and figure out whether or not I was going to take my vows for life. And it was a question for me because I had a lot of questions about whether this was really the life I should live or not. But I spent that year studying Mother Teresa's writings and falling in love again with the vision that she had of love and service to the poor. And I did take my final vows. This is the group of sisters on the day of our final profession. Everyone very happy. My assignment after profession changed several times. I think you can probably see that there is a very heavy coat of liquid paper underneath those words, Regina Mundi. My first assignment was to be Novice Mistress, which really terrified me. I was supposed to prepare these sisters for first vows, and at the time, I was 28, and many of the sisters who were coming in were older than I was. I entered very young. So anyway, I was first appointed Novice Mistress, and then I was appointed to go to help open a new house in Cuba, but they wouldn't give an American sister a visa to go to Cuba. And in the end, I went to Regina Mundi, which was a school, pontifical institute that taught theology only to sisters. And being sent to study was both a blessing and a curse. I enjoyed studying, but I knew because so few missionaries of charity were sent to study that if I were going to study theology, it meant that I could expect that most of the rest of my life would be spent working with the formation of the sisters and not directly with the poor, which was not something I had envisioned, but again, something that obedience was calling me to. This is the school where we studied, right in the shadow of St. Peter's. While I was studying, the Catholic Church issued a new code of canon law, which were directives governing every aspect of church life. And one of those things that the canon law required was that sisters rewrite their constitutions. The constitutions were the governing documents of every group. And Mother Teresa had written those constitutions for the Missionaries of Charity on her knees 8 years before I was born, after all the sisters had gone to bed at night. She would stay up alone writing these things, and they addressed every aspect of our lives. And when the Code of Canon Law was issued and there was this requirement that the constitutions be revised, that job fell to me to do the revision. And I was absolutely horrified and terrified. I agreed to do it under one condition, that my work remain anonymous. I didn't want people to think that I'd had anything to do with it because I didn't want to discredit the document in any sort of way. I was way too young to be doing that sort of thing, in my opinion. When I finished my studies, I was appointed Novice Mistress. This is the first and only group of novices that I prepared to take their first vows. After that, I was assigned to work with the sisters taking final vows. So I became Tertian Mistress. Tertian is, it's like the third year of novitiate, which is why they call it tertianship. When the sisters took vows, and when they didn't, I led the choir. That was one of the things that I did. When you read the book, you'll kind of read the story of how I learned to play the organ kind of by miracle. At professions also, I was the one who would call the name of the names of the sisters individually who were going to take vows. I would stand beside Mother as a witness during the professions, and then afterwards I would form part of the bodyguard that would, as we returned to the convent, because thousands of people came to these professions, mostly wanting to see, hear, and touch Mother Teresa. And by this time she was quite frail. This photo is from about 1995. I'm the one with the glasses there on the what's your far left. Sister Nirmala is on the other side of Mother. She was Mother Teresa's successor, became Superior General afterwards. Sister Elena, the sister kind of between us who's looking the other way, is the Regional Superior for all of Italy. This is a group of sisters that I prepared to take final vows. Profession Day. This is a really great day. And there is this spirit of camaraderie among the sisters. Everyone there is there together, feeling called to do something with purpose, something with meaning. And the joy you see on those faces is genuine. It's genuine. During the celebrations, Mother was also very happy on vow days. It really made her happy. We often met, Mother met religious and civil dignitaries all the time. I was there the first time that she and Diana met. During the years in which I was tertian mistress, many things happened. Mother's health declined, and two sisters began to exert a great deal of political influence on the group and draw the group very much to the right. That was something that didn't settle well with me. I felt like the group was kind of being taken over by this alternate vision. At the same time, also, I fell in love twice, once with a sister, once with a priest, and that complicated things immensely. I asked many times to be taken out of this responsibility of preparing the sisters for vows. I really didn't feel like I was the person who should be doing that. Eventually, I was appointed superior of a convent on the outskirts of Rome, and there I had more frustration because I couldn't get permission to do some of the programs for the poor that I really felt they needed and that we could have done. And during this time of my struggles, Mother Teresa's health failed more and more. This photo was taken in May of 1997, just a few months before Mother Teresa died. She's shrinking. Every time we would see her, she would seem shorter. At one point, she was quite a few inches taller than Sister Nirmala, and here she's not at all. If you look, you see her eyes are sunken. And we were standing in the back, really very concerned about Mother. This particular photo was taken in the Vatican. We had a community of sisters who worked with homeless women within the walls of the Vatican. If you're facing St. Peter's Square, it's just kind of right off to the left. And this picture was taken about 2 days before the section that I want to read to you now from my memoir. And this section is my last conversation with Mother Teresa. It's, I've been out and came back late for lunch. I've received permission at this point, just that month actually. Mother Teresa had stopped being Superior General. There was an election and Sister Nirmala was elected to succeed her. And I'd asked permission not to speak to Mother when she came to Rome, because as superior of one of the houses there, it was one of my duties would have been to speak with Mother. And Sister Nirmala said no, that I didn't have to, because I'd already asked permission to leave. And I had received a letter from Mother giving me that permission, but giving it to me to leave 5 months after I had first requested it. So I'm still there waiting for this time to expire so that I can actually go. By this point, I've started carrying this letter around with me because sisters found out. And they were trying very hard to convince me not to go, and the only way I could get them to stop trying to convince me was to show them this letter that Mother had signed already, saying that, eventually, when a certain amount of time had passed, I could go. And so I have been trying very hard during this visit to avoid Mother Teresa, and I'm eating lunch alone in the refectory because I came back late, and someone has reminded Mother that I'm going. And that someone, her name will be mentioned later on, is Sister Joseph Michael, someone with whom I had worked very closely. Back in Casalina, we'd missed lunch, and everyone was at afternoon siesta. Sister Joseph Michael wandered off somewhere, and I foraged some pasta. I was swallowing quickly, hoping to make it to bed for at least a few minutes before the bell rang, when the refectory door squeaked open. Mother stood firm, all 5 feet of her looking straight at me. Then she grabbed the door jamb for support. Indignation masked in her eyes. I nearly choked. Mother raised her hands, palm imploring. "What is this Mother hears about you?" I put down my fork and tried to swallow. I spotted Sister Joseph Michael slinking down the hall. What was I going to say? "God, where are you?" "Come to Mother now," she said, and led me toward her room. I grabbed my bag from the bench beside me and followed Mother, making sure to close the door behind us. Mother walked to her desk but did not sit. She put her hands on the desk and leaned into them to steady herself. Despite what I'd heard about Mother not always getting enough oxygen to her brain, she seemed fully alert, completely aware. She looked right through me. "Sister, tell Mother what's going on." I swallowed. "Mother, I'm going home." "Why, sister?" Mother lifted one wrinkled hand in an expression of incomprehension. "What's wrong?" "Mother, I just need to go." I began praying for an interruption, a knock on the door, a phone call from the Pope, an earthquake, anything. Mother fixed her eyes on mine, and I sensed her trying to understand. Part of me wanted so much to explain. "Tell Mother why." Her voice was softer now, pleading more than insisting. "Has someone been unkind to you?" There had been other sisters who, when they left, had told Mother they couldn't bear the unkindness they'd felt in community. I knew that's what they'd said because Mother had written several general letters over the years in which she told us that we'd driven the sisters out. She had begged us to love one another. The sisters in Torbella Monica loved me and I loved them. We had our spats, but nothing to complain to Mother about. "No, Mother, no one's been unkind." I searched for something to help her understand, but I knew that nothing I might say would satisfy Mother. For Mother, there never was, nor could there ever be, a sufficient reason to leave a God-given vocation. And none of the particulars I might point to were really why I was leaving anyway. It was far bigger than any one thing. "Mother, God is asking something else of me now." That sounded safe. How could Mother argue with God's will? "You mean you want to join another community? The Carmelites or Poor Clares?" Joining a cloistered community would have made some sense to Mother. I would still be married to Jesus, just realizing a different calling. "No, Mother, I don't want to join another community." She shook her finger at me, pain and confusion in her face. I was hurting her. She had trusted me. She had plans for me. She thought she knew me. She'd promised to give saints to Mother Church, and I was disappointing her in the worst way possible. "Don't you know that you belong to Jesus?" Mother said, playing what she must have considered a trump card. I had no right to make such a decision. I was Sister Donata, the freely given one. Jesus owned me. I wiped my sweaty palms on my sari. "Yes, Mother, I belong to Jesus, as any Christian does." I might have asked Mother to sit down, her eyes searching the plaster walls for an answer. I might have asked Mother to sit down, to calm down, so that we could have a heart-to-heart. I didn't. Mother's black and white convictions, the power her words held over my psyche, and the simple fact that I loved her so much would best me in any discussion. My only way out was to refuse to engage. Mother began to look around the room, her eyes searching the plaster walls for an answer. Finally, she looked at the desk, then up at me, and said, "Mother could believe this about anyone, but she cannot believe it about you." These were hard words, and I couldn't be sure what they meant. I'd wanted to believe that Mother knew who I was, knew that I had wanted to be a good missionary of charity more than I had ever wanted anything. Others had told me Mother knew me. Certainly the jobs she'd assigned me spoke of her trust in me. On the other hand, I'd never heard Mother even call my name. I was 39 years old. I'd known and followed Mother for 20 years, and for each of those years, I'd longed to hear Mother call me Sister Donata. I'd often seen her look my way when some sister pointed me out as the one who composed the hymn sung at profession, or the one who was in charge of a sister's formation, the one who worked so hard to get approval from the city council for the women's shelter, the one who taught such good classes to the sisters. But Mother had uttered my name when she gave it to me as a novice, and never again. In 20 years, even when we traveled together, even during the 3-day trip to Sweden where I was the only sister with Mother, she never once called me Sister Donata. I was just sister. I could imagine Mother saying, Mother can't believe this about you, to any sister in an attempt to keep her in the community. Did she remember how she'd scolded me the day I'd walked barefoot across the grass in Washington? How she'd told me to let Jesus use me without consulting me? Did she remember my letter confessing my relationship with Niobe? Did she remember how I'd pleaded with her not to admit Niobe to final vows and how she'd admitted her anyway? Did Mother know how much I loved the sisters, how much I loved the poor, how much I loved her? Did she know that through it all, my love for God had never waned? Did she know how much I hated to disappoint her? Sister, listen to Mother, talk to Mother. She was beating the desk with the flat of her hand, every beat emphasizing every word. Why do you want to go? It all flashed through my head. The suffocation, the disillusionment, the frustration, the thirst for more. Mother, I wanted to say, Mother, my God isn't like yours. Your God asks you to deny yourself. He counts every sacrifice and will reward each act of self-denial. Your God is Jesus crucified. My God is the God of the resurrection, the God who says, enough of this suffering, let's heal the world. Your God is a jealous God, one who says, so long as you never get too close to any human being, I will be close to you. You may not feel my closeness on earth, but I will be close in heaven. My God says, I offer you friends. I offer you lovers. I am present in the people I give you now, people in whom I hope you will delight as I do. Your God says, I bind you to this life forever. You are my spouse. Marriage is an unbreakable covenant. My God says, I invite you to walk with me. I'm not sure where we'll end up, but we'll walk together, and others will join us on the way. Mother, I'd like you to understand, but I can't take the chance that you won't. I don't want your God anymore. My God says, I came that you may have life and have it to the full. I'm following my God out the door, Mother, and you can't stop me. I said none of this, of course. What I said was, Mother, I'm going home. I reached inside my bag. Mother has already given me permission. I pulled out the letter. Mother took it from my hand. Mother's expression of surprise as she read the letter confirmed my suspicion that this had been just one in a pile of hundreds of papers Mother signed every day. Mother had never read it, or if she had read it, she hadn't recognized my name, or perhaps she'd read it and then, given her frail physical state, forgotten that one of the sisters she trusted most had decided to turn her back on Jesus. Mother, I said, taking a deep breath, if Jesus wants me to, I will come back. Even as I said this, I knew I would never return. Of course Jesus wants you. Don't go. I saw the determination and frustration in her eyes as she looked at me. Then Mother closed her eyes for a moment. Perhaps she was praying. Perhaps she realized I was not going to give her anything with which she could engage. Or perhaps she just wasn't able to take any more of the conversation. Mother will speak with you later, she said. As I knelt for Mother's blessing, I felt her hands press my veiled head, both blessing me and pushing me out. Thank you very much. I have a tiny bit more with the slides because that's not quite the end of the story, but we are definitely almost there. Even after I left the convent, the sisters gave me a plane ticket and $500 to start my new life after 20 years. But even after I left, I still loved the sisters very much. I considered them my family. A few months after I left, Mother Teresa died. It was very hard for me to mourn her passing alone. I tried several times to call the sisters in Rome, and I just couldn't get through. I'd gone to live with my sister in Houston. I attended a memorial service for Mother in Houston's cathedral. The bishop there, during the homily, went on and on about this privilege he'd had to meet Mother Teresa on a layover at George Bush Airport. And I knelt in the back of the church and just cried. No one in the church knew who I was. It was hard. After a few months, I tried together with two other ex-missionaries of charity to form a community, kind of according to Mother's vision. It was something that I had envisioned as a place where people of all different sorts of religions, different ways of life, men, women, young people, old people, would gather in a different sort of community, but it really didn't work. And after a few months, I realized my heart really wasn't in it. I went back to school. I got a bachelor's degree in English. Eventually, I got a master's degree in creative writing, and now I have a book. It took me a while to find my way through the world after I left the convent. Everything was different. My whole relationship with this thing I'd called God for so long changed in very painful ways in the beginning. It was a complicated process. Now I believe in living life fully. I think I've always kind of believed that. I believe in contact with the reality of the present moment more than living for an afterlife. I enjoy at the moment living life without a story of God superimposed on everything. Just kind of live in this kind of intimate connection. The other thing I believe in, and Debra touched on this in the introduction, is the importance of telling our stories. When I was in the beginning stages of telling my story, I met a woman who volunteered to help me, Darlene Chandler Bassett, whom Debra mentioned. That was the beginning of A Room of Our Own Foundation and the Gift of Freedom, because I really think it's important that people begin to talk, just all of us, from our own experiences. And this is a picture of the place. This is the last slide that Debra mentioned. This is Ghost Ranch and the retreat there a couple of years ago. I'm there with the papers in my hand. The wonderful woman in the yellow t-shirt and sneakers next to me is Sister Helen Prejean, who wrote Dead Man Walking. She was there with us on that retreat, and Darlene is the woman next to her. Immediately above me is Debra.
Desperately in need of a haircut.
Debra with longer hair, that's right. A couple of people over. There's Robbie Harold, who's also here today. And there are several other women here who have been connected with the Room of Her Own Foundation in various ways. It's really something that's very important to me, this helping people tell their stories. I really think that's vital. So much so that during this time of promoting my book, I've promised Arojo $3 for every book I sell at an event. So I encourage you, and any way that you'd like to help out, there's also a little pamphlet there with just some information. But now I think is the time. I'm going to sit down. Debra's going to ask me questions, and then you get to ask questions, and we just have a little discussion.
A great privilege to ask these questions. Mary, one of the most moving things in the book is about your evolving understanding of love, and you gave a very eloquent explanation of it at the end of your talk. But can you tell us a little bit more about how that evolved and maybe some of the specific relationships that helped you expand your understanding?
Yes, we get to the sex right away. That's Don't have to worry when it's going to appear. Can you all hear me?
Yeah,
it sounds different to me that it did up there. Okay, that's great. Yeah, so I was in the Missionaries of Charity for about 12, 13 years, being sometimes very, very lonely, even though I was surrounded by these sisters. Because of those rules that I talked about in the beginning that forbade us to have real friendships with people. And at a certain point, there was a sister who approached me, and after, we had been together in the community for a couple of weeks, I was hanging my clothes, and she appears there, and she whispers in my ear, and she says, "Sister Donata, I love you." And no one had ever said these words to me before. I was really kind of completely swept off my feet, and I developed a relationship with her, which eventually led to me breaking my vows of chastity. It was an exceedingly complicated relationship. I'm not going to go into details now because otherwise why read the book?
It's worth it.
But it became a very, very complicated relationship. But it was something that began to open me to the marvels that could be there when you could be yourself in front of someone else. And eventually I developed a very different sort of relationship with the priest who was my confessor. We were friends for many years before that developed any sort of physical component, and the physical components were small. They are in the book, but it was much more, I suppose, something of the heart, and it was a relationship that really helped me value myself again, because I think as the Missionaries of Charity, with the emphasis on humility, with the emphasis on obedience, with the emphasis on really just self-denial all the time, it led you to have an idea of yourself. I mean, we were taught to tell ourselves that we are nothing. Those were the words. And we were to repeat that sort of prayer. I am nothing, God is all, that kind of thing. And that anything that we did that was not good came from us. And any good that we did came from God living in us. That was kind of the attitude. But these relationships that I had started to teach me that maybe there was something good in me. And that definitely opened things up. Those kinds of loving relationships and the experience of getting close to other people. Yeah.
Thank you. As you describe your process of growing in the order and hearing both critical comments about your characteristics, that you're need for greater obedience, and yet being asked to take on increasing levels of responsibility as a very young woman. How did you understand that in your own mind as that was happening to you? And what did you think about leadership? Did you think about leadership at all?
I thought about leadership a lot, a lot. Also because when I was in the process of rewriting the constitutions, it was kind of an opportunity to rethink things. And I could see that, you know, the Vatican Council and the new Code of Canon Law even, but to a lesser degree, were calling for a rethinking of things. The mandate in rewriting the constitutions was that I would actually change nothing that was not required to be changed by the Code of Canon Law. But I did have the opportunity to write a kind of addendum when this document was sent for approval. The sisters had to vote on it. I attached kind of an appendix to it with kind of my suggestions. Which was a very exciting thing for me to have the opportunity to do, because I really felt like we needed more democracy. That any sister, so many sisters had great ideas and everything was kind of being squelched. And sisters were very rarely given the opportunity to make a real creative contribution. And that just always seemed like a real pity. Also the sense that while I was given a great deal of responsibility, I was there preparing the sisters to take their vows, which was really kind of a big deal. So I had all this responsibility, and if I was told kind of, you know, like, if they didn't turn out all right, that was my fault, you know, so that level of responsibility. But I was given no authority, in the sense that I had to do it exactly the way I was told to do it. There were certain subjects I was supposed to cover, etc. And I managed to, you know, find ways to do things differently anyway. But the sense of being held greatly responsible, but without the authority to do things in the way that you thought they needed to be done, that just created this incredibly difficult situation for me. Yeah.
I have to say, although, you know, the parts about sex were very compelling, actually your intellectual journey and your struggle to assert yourself as a critical thinker when you were rewriting the Constitution, I found incredibly compelling. And I guess, you know, I'd like to ask a little bit more about that conflict between obedience and critical thinking, and how you think of yourself now as a critical thinker in relation to you as a memoir writer.
Critical thinker and a memoir writer, yeah. The memoir writing piece of it, I made a decision very early on that I wanted a narrative voice that kept very close to the actual events I was experiencing. You know, there are many different ways to write a memoir. A lot of times, and very wonderfully so, people will adapt a kind of a double voice, where I look back on the things that happened to me and I tell you not only what happened to me, but what I think now about what happened to me then. And that gives you an opportunity to, you know, think more critically about it, whatever. I did a lot of critical thinking in that way, but I decided when I was going to write the book that that's not the kind of book I wanted. The kind of book I wanted was one where readers would read it and become immersed in the story, that they would just be present with me in that moment as I was experiencing those things. I wanted readers to know what it felt like to be there. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't put on that extra layer of critical thinking. These kinds of opportunities give me the chance to say things like that. And the next book I'm working on gives me a chance to kind of reflect on some of the experiences that I had. But this one, you know, even the words I was choosing, I wanted the words to be so simple that nobody would get caught in the words. They'd just get taken up in the story. And that was, you know, how I approached that. And I think that, you know, people who have read it have afterwards thought critically about it themselves, which was also one of my goals, to get people to look at these things and make their own critical decisions. Because I think it's really important that we all think for ourselves, the way that I really was not encouraged to do for 20 years. I think that made me value that ability even more.
Well, that leads to a sort of, for me and probably everybody else, obvious question about how you prepared yourself for people who might be angry that you lifted this veil.
Yeah, you know, one thing that I noticed is that some people tend to be very invested in the image of Mother Teresa, especially Catholics, especially, she was kind of held up as like the example, like this is the good things in the Catholic Church. There may be, right now there are all sorts of other things that are coming to light, but at least we have this. I write about in the book a time when Mother was asked to open a house in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which wasn't far from where I grew up in Beaumont, Texas. We were just kind of on the border with Louisiana there. And I was surprised. It's kind of like, at that time we didn't have a lot of houses in the United States, and I could think of many places that were poorer somehow than Baton Rouge, and it's kind of like, why exactly are we going to Baton Rouge? And it was because that was the first place that the pedophilia scandals in the Catholic Church became public, and the bishop wanted Mother Teresa and the sisters there to repair the reputation of the church. So any sense of giving Mother Teresa 3 dimensions, it's not appreciated by people who are invested in presenting her in 1 or 2 dimensions. I present a more human Mother Teresa, somebody who had, who got frustrated, who got tired, who did not always have a smile on her face the way that you often hear her described. And I knew people would not always be happy about that, but kind of what I told myself was that people who are ready to hear the story that I have to tell, just me speaking openly and honestly about my own experiences, they'll be ready for it. And people who aren't ready for that, they're not going to be ready for it. It won't affect the way they look on Mother Teresa, because that was one of my big concerns, was that people who had been inspired to do good things by Mother Teresa's example, I didn't want that part of it to go away, because she has been inspirational for so many people. And she still continues to be inspirational for me in many senses. I mean, I still retain a great deal of affection for her. But, people who aren't ready to see her in more 3 dimensions, they will attack me. And, there's a little bit of that going on, but not much, because I think, so far, what seems to be happening is that people appreciate the honesty of the book, and those who aren't ready, they attack me. But that was also part of my training as a sister, I think. We were always taught, to accept any sort of reprimand in the spirit of Jesus who stood silent before Pilate, which those of you who read the book laugh a little bit when you hear that, because the first time I heard that, it was kind of like I was about to raise my hand and say, but Jesus, he talked to Pilate. They had this big conversation about truth. What is truth? Jesus was silent before Herod. But the whole point of the instruction was that we were not supposed to, that those things weren't important. The facts weren't important. What was important was our attitude of humility in accepting those things, and that we should accept any sort of reprimand in silence. So I had 20 years of practice at that, of realizing that it doesn't really matter what other people are saying about me. What matters is that I'm living my life out of my core values.
And I think you also present this as more than a book, but an opportunity for dialogue. And I thought you might want to say a little bit about your blog and some of the conversations plug for the blog.
It's not exactly a blog. There's a part of my website which is maryjohnson.co, not com, but just .co, where it's called Mary's Salon at the end. And I have various topics, and just kind of invite people to discuss things like, where do you find your purpose? Another topic is about religion and sexuality. I forget what all the topics are, but it's kind of like opening little rooms for these sorts of discussions. And I'd be really happy if you visit those. There's also a place on the website where you can send in a reader's response to the book, which is kind of a different one. And Debra's done that, and Brina's done that, and just different ways, because that really is something. I want the book to be a place for people to dialogue, because I think so often people get stuck in talking about theories of things, especially if you talk about spirituality or talk about religion or your life. And it's really hard sometimes to speak from your own experience. But I think that things aren't going to change until we learn how to do that, because that's where we're experiencing it. We have to tell our stories.
Well, rather than hog all of the opportunity for dialogue and questions, why don't I open it up to the audience and then I can come back. Questions, comments? Yeah.
So Mary, when was the first glimmer of I Want Out?
When was the...
Yeah, was there a...
I didn't hear Wayne, sorry.
What was the first glimmer of notion that you wanted out? That, and how did, in any distinct reflection as to what was happening in your life at that time?
The first glimmer of when I wanted out. You know, there were moments from the first day when I wanted out. There were things that were hard in various sorts of ways all along. I remember at one point during those first 6 months just really praying that the sisters would find some reason to send me home, because that would be a sign that God wanted me out if the sisters sent me. Because I was there because I thought God wanted me there, and then how could I leave, you know? So at various points, I would feel things. What happened towards the end was that I began to feel very suffocated. I just had this experience. It wasn't like there were a whole lot of new things happening or, you know, a big thing that took me over the brink, but I just kind of felt like I couldn't breathe anymore. I felt suffocated. And what I did is I told myself, and I made this promise to God, that I would live during that year as a real missionary of charity. I'd keep all the rules, I'd do whatever I was told, because by that time I'd been breaking quite a few of them. And I'd just give myself the chance again to do everything right the way I was supposed to be doing it. And if at the end of that year, I felt like I was myself in this group, that I was making a creative contribution, that I felt fully alive again in this group, I would stay. And if at the end of that year I didn't, then I would go. And at the end of the year, it just became very clear to me that I needed to go.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Okay.
That's, out of the 20 years, how many years would you say you were content being there?
I was content probably for, you know, content most of the time. Right, probably about 12 or 13 of those years. You know, I was happy while I was in Washington working with the poor. I was happy in the South Bronx. I would have these various things that would happen that would annoy me. I mean, everybody's life has, you know, its ups and its downs. But basic contentment for quite a while, actually, until it really kind of became way too much. And I think, again, it was that sense of purpose. I knew I was there doing something important somehow and helping people's lives. And that was something that was very rewarding.
Thank you. Yeah. Actually, yeah. If you want, yes.
I think what I have more is a comment that perhaps will direct a comment from you. But of course, I read the book, as did Debra, and was gripped from the first. And of course, the very explicit things that are contained in the book are very interesting. But one of the things, as a young woman who went to Catholic high school, or went to school throughout, up until the end of high school, was that I appreciated and enjoyed was your working out your vocation. Because I think the idea of vocation is often misunderstood. Mm-hmm. So that the idea that young people, naive young people, are coerced, and it sort of denies the fact that some people are making a very deeply felt life choice. And sometimes we have a tendency to sort of laugh and snicker at women's religious vocation, and nuns, well, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, she became a nun because she
right,
couldn't
right,
XYZ.
A whole
yes.
pack of frigid women. And yet I think that one of the things that your memoir does for us is very clearly explaining to us how a young woman understands her vocation, embraces it, questions it, and finally has to make some life changes. But it was beautiful to go through the stages of the vocation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Brenda.
Well said.
Yeah, thank you. And that there were so many wonderful sisters in the group, you know. It comes out, you know, there were conflicts, and always the question is, you know, kind of why did I leave? But it was very hard to leave many very beautiful, very wonderful, very, you know, just terrific people in that group. Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to say a couple things. One is that I love the book, and I'm sure everyone here read it, also loved the book. And I wondered what your gods were now. How would you, if you were to address the question what your gods are now, what would you say? How would you
Who are my gods now? Is that the kind of question?
I wouldn't say
What? Who, what, how?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, maybe it's more of a how. How do I relate to the fact that I am not, you know, I am just one small part of this big world. Yeah, for me, it's a, I find my place here. There are a lot of things going on that I don't understand, and I don't need to understand them in order to live well. I think one thing that's become very important to me is to acknowledge the fact that I don't know a lot, you know, and I don't need to have a purpose imposed on my life from outside, or to imagine that there is some supreme being somewhere who has a special purpose for my life, but to know that I create purpose in my life by the choices that I make. So I think that's, yeah, it's the way I relate to the world in every moment, and the people who are in it, and myself. This is where I find the meaning, not in some sort of external transcendent reality that I think somehow we kind of superimpose that, because it's a good story. It's a really good story, but it's one that doesn't work for me anymore, that God story. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just curious, who took most of the photos and kind of how they count? You know, it just seems like such an everyday sentimental thing to have a photo album, and it's just so curious to picture women in the community having that.
Yes, we were not allowed to keep, we could keep one photo. We could keep the photo of the day that we took our religious vows, and we could keep one other photo of our family. So these people gave us photos all the time, and then we would send them home in our monthly letter to our parents. We could write a letter once a month to our parents, and it was this wonderful thing that when I got home and then I was starting to write this book, and my parents moved and I helped them pack, and I discovered 20 years of letters. They were in the filing cabinet, they were in shoe boxes in the back of the closet, they were in some of the most odd places, but I got back all but 3 or 4 letters from 20 years, and they had kept all these photos. My parents came to visit me a few times. A lot of the photos were taken by my father. The photos during profession, we had people who lived in Rome who enjoyed taking the photos for the sisters because they knew it was the one thing the sisters were going to keep, and so they were really happy to do that, and they would take photos from those days. The one photo that I really don't have any idea where it came from, I know I found it in those letters that I'd sent home to my parents, but it's the photo in the beginning where I'm playing the flute and the woman's playing the guitar, and we're in the refectory because we did not have cameras. And I don't know who took that picture. I don't know who gave it to me, because nobody from outside would have been in that room. And that's the one photo I'm very curious about it, and I suppose I'll never know. But they're from all sorts of different places. And you're right, we did not keep those photos. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you see religious orders by their very nature as stifling of authenticity? And how would you, reflecting on your experience, how might you reimagine a religious community that might maintain more of a balance?
I'm very grateful for this question, because definitely there are many religious orders in the Catholic Church which do not stifle individuality. This one did. But most, especially within the United States, especially American nuns, the vast majority of them welcome an individual's contribution, and they educate their sisters, and they're far more democratic than the organization that we have. So I don't even need to imagine it. I could, introduce you to several groups that are working this thing out and have worked it out for decades, and none of those groups are perfect, but they come, they're doing a good job at that part of it. The thing that happens, though, is that those are the groups that they changed after the Second Vatican Council. They heard the mandate of the Second Vatican Council to renew and to become more open to democratic decisions in various ways. And they gave up their habits, and they entered into a form of life that was more one with the people that they served. They broke down a lot of the divisions so that people could share their community life in various ways. There wasn't this big wall of separation. And I think that those sisters are doing wonderful work, and that they're also giving a very unique form of witness, because they retain this connection with their own sisters in community. They retain their vows of chastity. They understand obedience in a different way, a healthier way. But the problem is, I think that it requires more maturity to be attracted and to understand the value of that way of life than a young girl looking to join a religious community has. So most of the vocations nowadays are going to orders which still have habits, which still have a whole lot of rules, which still have the big separation. There's us in the community and then the people outside. A lot of the vocations are going there because to a teenager, that's a countercultural thing. That's something, there's this attraction there. I'm going to be doing something different, something really remarkable. And they don't realize, in their idealism, I identify with this very much. You're there to give everything, and it's wonderful, but you don't realize you're really going to give everything. Even the parts of you that make up what is most precious and form the most precious gifts you have to offer, the opportunity to use those will even be taken from you often. And so there is that difficulty, that to understand the attraction of the sisters who are living this life, it's kind of like, well, why should I join them? I can do that the way I am now. I don't need to take vows to do that. And to understand what they're doing requires a bit of maturity, I think. I think what they're doing is wonderful, but no one's joining them, those groups, and they're dying out.
I'm actually going to take a minute to say that I'm glad that you mentioned the idea of it being a countercultural move, because I think, thinking historically, you and I are about the same age, and we've talked about this, that we're kind of in between, we're post-60s generation, and we're pre-third wave or anything else of feminism. So I'm wondering if you felt like if you had lived in a slightly earlier era, or do you think there's a similarity between this vocation and this calling and something that you might have felt then or even now in terms of Arojo and women's issues that would be more aligned with social movements?
Yeah, and you probably have more background in all of these things than I do and could give a better answer. But I think, yes, like the connection with Arojo, I see myself looking for this community of women, looking for a way to work together with women. It was very odd because the first time that I met Darlene, who was the founder of Arojo, some of you have heard this story before, but I found myself at Ghost Ranch. I was in this group called Circle of Women. I did not want to be there. I introduced myself to the group. You have to go around and say, I am so-and-so from such and such, and I'm here because, so I'm Mary Johnson, I'm from Beaumont, Texas. I'm here because pottery was full and hiking was full. And this is my fifth choice. I really don't want to be in this group. And I think you should know that at this point in my life, I don't trust women very much. And I just, why not be honest with these people? I have to spend a week with them, And during that week, things started to change for me again, and I started to experience again that sense of sisterhood. You saw I grew up, I have 5 sisters, natural sisters, and a brother. I mean, I always lived this life surrounded by women, and now again, I can say that I trust women again. That's a good thing, and that a community of women working together is really a very, very wonderful thing. And yes, if I had been born 10 years earlier, I might have joined a commune somewhere. I don't know. One of my earliest memories is my father taking us for a peace march against the Vietnam War. At that time, we still lived in Ann Arbor, and I think I was probably about 6, and we had these candles, and it was like, yeah, they gotta stop killing people over there, and I'm gonna stand here with my candle until somebody pays attention, you know? And that those sorts of things were always kind of important to me.
They were present, yeah. There was another question, I think? Did I miss a question? Yeah.
Throughout the book, you go through so many intellectual and spiritual transformations.
Yeah.
It's one of the most interesting things I found about the book. And what advice would you give to the audience of people that are going through these types of transformations themselves?
Yeah, let it happen. I think, it can be very hard. It can be really, really difficult because being changed is not easy. There are reasons, you think of the clay to the pot, okay, being formed there, and this part's crooked, and they smash it down and start again, or the whole image of the smelting thing, you're there in the fire. I mean, change can feel like that sometimes, and it can be really, really hard, but it's worth it because you want to grow, There's the seed, and there's the plant, and then there's the flower, and then it becomes the seed again, the plant and the flower. And you have to go through the whole thing. If you stop that cycle and say, okay, so I've reached this point, and I'm not going to change anymore, and where's the life there? And you're not going to grow and reach some new realizations that you'll have. So I guess that would be the thing that I tell to myself a lot. Or when it gets hard and there's this changes are happening, just kind of let it go with the flow. I think I hate that go with the flow, but anyway, it works. But one of my favorite images for God, and it's really weird that I dumped my water at this point, because that, in the book, one of my favorite images for God is God as a river. God is a river that's flowing through, the river of life with the trees on each side and the water everywhere, and it's kind of like floating in God somehow. And now I would use different words, I'd probably know floating life or love or something like that. But just let the change happen, go with the flow, knock the water over, whatever it is.
That seems like a perfect segue, but before we segue, did you want to make an announcement about some other activities at the museum?
Sure.